Hi, this is a Curvy 3D modeling tutorial in the Gigantic Character Modeling series, where we model this giant character. This episode is focused on his bracer, his wrist armor, which is going to be an ornately carved piece wrapped around the shape of the armor. Now the main trick here is to do the wrapping of one mesh around another mesh. So here we've got what we're aiming for on the left, and on the right we've got a loft object, the same one we used as a placeholder while we were sculpting the rest of the character. Now I'm going to make a cube. This is going to be a border around the edge of the armor. If I press A to get the wireframe up and then increase the resolution of using the resolution slider, I can make a grid. And then I'm going to use the rectangular select to delete all the parts of the mesh I don't need. So I don't need the sides or the bottom or the top of this mesh. And I want to hollow out the middle as well, just to give a box shape. At the moment I've still got the back of the object visible. So if I rotate around, we can still see we've got the back faces there. So I'm going to explode the object into all the separate parts using mesh explode. Then I can pick the back faces and the front faces separately and delete the ones I don't need. So explode takes something into its separate parts. And then the resulting shape I'm going to thicken to make a border. Now it's important here that the mesh has plenty of divisions from side to side and top to bottom, because when we deform it into place around the wrist, it'll need those divisions to curve smoothly. Now the next part of this process, which is a bit more precise, is that we need to scale down the model to fit in the first top right 4 squares of the grid. So the top right quarter of the grid, the first 4 squares. The curvy grid is sized from 0 to 2 and 0 to -2 on the other side of the axis. So we're trying to center this mesh in the 0 to 1 part, which is the first 4 grid lines. We're going to map that 0 to 1 part of the grid over the surface of the curvy object later. In fact, we want to slightly inset the object so it's not right up close to the edge. We want a little border around it so it's slightly smaller than those first 4 squares. So once we've lined it up, we can drag the box onto our loft as a child, and then select the box and use mesh fit to surface of child curvy prim, parent curvy prim. So you see this has wrapped the box round the shape of the wrist. Sometimes it'll come out in reverse, so we'll need to use mesh reverse surface to make it pop out the right way. I found my box there was a little bit uncentered, a little bit too big, so it didn't quite wrap onto the loft correctly. So I'm going to try again, wrap to surface of curvy prim and reverse the surface. And now our border has been shaped to our loft. A nice precise curved shape. So next we're going to try that Same process for slightly more interesting shapes. So next we're going to make the studs which go around the edge of the border. The studs are basically a sphere. Use shift drag with the move tool to align it with the top of my border. And then I'm going to squash it by changing the squash slider. So now I have one stud and to make a whole set of studs off that, I'm going to duplicate as a proxy, change the mode to proxy array, and set the number of copies I want in either direction in the array pop-up. Not quite sure, you can change these later. I'm using quite high numbers so we get lots of copies. And then you change the offset A and offset B separately. So in this case I'm changing offset A side to side and offset B up and down. To get more precise control over the placement of these, I'm going to zoom in so I can make sure that the bottom right dot is lined up correctly. I find this is easier if I open two views, one of them looking at the bottom right zoomed in and one of them looking at the top left zoomed in. So I pick offset A, tweak the side to side, and then offset B, tweak the up and down. That's good. So now we're going to bake them all into proxies, which means you can move them separately, and then bake them again into sphere objects, so we can edit them individually. I need to get rid of all of the ones in the middle. A simple way to do that is to Control J to join them all into a single mesh, select the middle ones, select the connected parts with mesh select connected, and then press delete. Now we have the nice studs go around the edge. Next we want to sculpt the face, the ornate part. For this, another way to make a grid is to draw a loft and quickly tidy up the edges with the ruler tool and use tilt align to axis. This is just a simple way to get a mesh, a grid of whatever density we need. And now I can use the sculpt with the sculpt mirroring turned on, and I'm just going to sketch in a rough caricature of a face. First using the add tool, the smooth tool by holding shift, sculpting in a nose, some eyes. Again, the first pass on the sculpt is just to get a sense of the proportions. And then I'm going to sculpt in more fine shapes later on with the pinch tool. Some furrows around the forehead. This part is meant to be more stylized, so you can have faces, you can have skulls, you can have creatures, all sorts on armour, and it makes it much more lively than just having blank plates of armour. Now I'm moving in with the subtool and pinch to add some crisper edges around the face, keeping it quite stylized and shaped. sculpting in a few details around the eyes. And when I'm finished with the sculpt, it's ready to drag on to my loft. So I'm going to drag each of the flat parts onto my loft and go through each one and wrap them onto my loft object. Oh, notice that I dragged the entire lot into the central axis so I could use the mirror sculpt, and then I'm now dragging it back so it's lining up with the 0 to 1 part in the top right, those 4 squares in the top right. So now it's ready to apply onto the loft. So we're using mesh fit to surface of parent curvy prim. And if they appear hollow, you can use mesh reverse surface. Notice I can make the menus stick by dragging out the top right little dot in each menu. So we've mapped the face, the studs, and the border. Now we don't need the original loft anymore, and it's ready to place onto our model. So now we're going to pull in the original character model that we've been building all series, load in the sword, and move the wrist guard into place. So just drag, rotate, and scale. And move it into place, and there we've got the finished wrist guard. And this model is now ready to export into your rendering engine of choice. For me, I'll be using Blender. So check out the next video where we get our curvy model into Blender.